it's just you and me.
Oh, okay.
For the video record, please introduce yourself, name and affiliation.
Stephen Bosacker, the Director of Public Sector Innovation for Living Cities.
So we're some number of months into the second cohort status report this morning, and just reflect on the process, reflect on the morning.
Well, first of all, it was great to see these teams having evolved after 7 months after the kickoff. I felt like when I walked in the room, I could actually see the maturing of groups. They're a little bit more cross-sector. These city teams have reached outside themselves and involved other people from the community. The city people that were here felt an almost immediate sense of camaraderie because they're all tackling a similar problem. And so they met folks maybe for the first time 7 months ago, and they're seeing them again. So, just the notion of the value of multi-city convening and multi-city work was really fascinating to watch this evolution happen and this kind of growth and maturing of these teams and the kind of conversation that it can yield. Then, of course, we went into the day, and as I had looked at and watched this agenda develop, felt a little bit uneasiness about the experimental nature of it, and so far so good in terms of what it means to take a risk with a group of people. The one thing that I have learned from a long time ago about putting bright public servants together in a single room is that even if you're not entirely prepared, they'll fill the gaps for you because they feel intensely about these issues. They're willing to talk, they're willing to share issues, they're willing to share problems, they're not shy. And that was true this morning. You could feel that, you could sense that, you could feel a little sense of pride about where their projects have come, but you could also start to see certain themes line up between them, and certainly an interest between them about how they might solve it differently through the questions that they would ask, whether, filling again gaps that a city might not have thought about in their particular problem. So all the things that you really want to get out of pulling people together were starting to show themselves this morning.
Very good. If the game were productized before Christmas, would you buy it for anybody?
Yeah, well, that's a really, you know what? I am enough of a public servant nerd that the answer is yes, because I also circulate among them. I would buy it for some people, and partly because of the conversations that it prompted. And again, it's certainly for a certain audience. But on the other hand, I was fascinated by how even resistance, when you sat down at the table, for those that are not game players or didn't really know how the pieces worked, how they slipped into kind of the seriousness about the role play, about the conversations, about making a case for transparency or inclusivity or creativity. On some level, it spoke volumes about how the game was conceptualized, and I applaud Eric for getting that right.
So let's leave the room for a moment and these 5 case stories in progress, and talk about engagement at the proverbial 30,000-foot level. I'm wondering, both based on your experience in living cities, but also city and state government, you've been in the trenches a long time, and your sense here in 2015, whether governments are prepared to engage a new generation of citizens who really expect expectation kind of on different terms than back in the day?
I don't think that they're prepared. And I think that it is why, on some level, this kind of cohort is so important. Because even as we went out to try to kind of find cities who had some promising practices, and as I said this morning in my introductory comments, that cities engage every day even when they don't know that they're engaging every day. There are major shifts in kind of expectations of people, not only by age demographics, but really because of technology and because of mobility and the choices that people have, that really speak differently to what we need to be thinking about from the public sector side of kind of keeping people interested. Number one, and number two, I do think that there's a sense that people have let go a little bit of civic life, of kind of the importance of civic involvement and civic life. And so if you haven't been kind of exercising those muscles in a rigorous way as those shifts have occurred, I think you can slip behind in your own culture, kind of being prepared for, a new twist or a next generation that has a different notion about how they want to play a role. And again, sorry to not get out of the room entirely, but when you are forced to be put in the shoes of someone else's definition of what a person might represent, and for cities today, that's new immigrants, that's refugees, that's some disgruntled communities that weren't the same as they were 10 or 15 years ago. You have to be adept at finding either new paths or different paths or refreshed paths to keep people properly engaged, if that's a value that your community holds. And so I think that there's work to be done, and I think that we're seeing evidence of that here, but elsewhere in the country as well. I don't think anyone believes that anyone's immune from the kind of disgruntlement that communities can feel if they don't feel that they've been involved in shaping their community.
Without the
Sure.
that would be great.
Frank Mirabal, Director of Collective Impact, City of Albuquerque.
Thank you very much. So the holidays are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Probably some family get-together.
Mm-hmm.
Over a Thanksgiving table, somebody asks you, Frank, what are you working on? What is the story in that approachable over dinner conversation?
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe it to crazy old Harold?
Yeah, I think the main story, so the main narrative is that, I'm working in immigrant communities, with entrepreneurs, and just let them know of all of the resources that are available to them as they have some really intriguing ideas of starting a business, creating a path for themselves. And so within city government, my story is, how do we best support them as they try to pursue their dreams, just like you and I.
And you're borrowing an analogy or perhaps a path identified in healthcare. Talk about that.
Yeah, so there's this whole notion of a healthcare navigator that works in communities, meets people where they are, connects them to healthcare access, services, so they can have a healthy family and healthier lives. And really we're trying to take an interesting spin on this idea and applying it to an entrepreneurial ecosystem where a person is working within communities and pointing people in the right direction to where those resources are to help them start a business or grow their business.
You were saying that part of that came from kind of a very human moment in talking to immigrant entrepreneurs or would-be immigrant entrepreneurs, and give us a sense of those human moments, when light bulbs go off saying, that's it, that's the thing that,
Right.
that we need to be doing.
Well, as you well know, the whole immigration debate in our country is very polarizing and very political. So it's really important that we have these human moments with folks. We understand their narratives, we understand their challenges, and at the end of the day, outside of whether a person is documented or undocumented, they have a story to tell. They love their children, they want a better life for their family. And so if we focus in on those things, and they're living in our community, and so we want them to have every opportunity that a citizen would have.
In terms of one of those stories, and you just mentioned it in the other room, of somebody who just wanted to be heard, can you recap that a little bit? Or I think the language that you use, you just want to feel welcome. Can you retell that story?
Sure. Well, I think that so we were at a small business deep dive, and there was a person there that would identify as being an immigrant from Mexico, and he basically was saying, "Hey, look, I know what you hear in the media about immigrants. I know that the stories that the media are telling aren't always good. Really, at the end of the day, we're not much different than you. We want a good education for our kids. We want a better life, and we will work hard." and we will contribute to our community. So all we want is an acknowledgement, and we just want to feel welcome. We don't want to feel threatened in our communities. We want to feel welcome, and we will contribute, and you know that we will work hard to achieve our dreams.
And this is no small part of the population of Albuquerque.
It's a significant population, yeah. The last census, estimates about 65,000 immigrants in our community, most of them of Mexican descent.
And on a proportion basis to the overall population?
It's probably about 10%.
Okay. So let's go back to your holiday conversations. Let's say that you run into a former colleague, someone who's worked in city government and knows all the joys and frustrations of working within the city. How would you say that this initiative is a little bit different, and what is its unique value proposition for somebody who knows the inside of city government and might be just cynical enough to say, been there, done that?
Yeah, I think the real value is that we have over 30 partners at the table. And so these folks are coming to the table in the spirit of what can we do to pitch in? What can we do to help immigrant entrepreneurs, tribal entrepreneurs, arts and cultural businesses? And they're coming with no expectation of funding attached to it. They're coming in the spirit of collaboration, and I think that's something that's really unique. We're often in the state of scarce resources. So bringing people together when there's no expectation of funding is pretty unique. It's like our Christmas party, and I come to the party and I don't expect a gift.
Beautiful. Nice way to play off that. What does success look like?
Success looks like families that have a great idea, they want to start a business, they start their business and they increase their household income. For us, we could be looking at this as a job creation strategy, and yeah, if we can create a number of jobs through the growth of these small businesses, great. But at the end of the day, we want increased household income. We want folks to have the income to, if they want to send their kids to a good school, they can do that. If they want to do other things, and be part of the economic mainstream, that they have that opportunity.
What have you learned that wasn't obvious when you began?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the most obvious is that anytime that you're talking about immigrant entrepreneurship, the language barrier is front and center. That's always the biggest issue. I guess if there's any unique thing, I think that the immigrant businesses that are out there, they need to connect to broader audiences. They need to connect to more customers. And because of the language barrier, sometimes they're limited to the audiences that they can connect to. So I think that the language skills are important, but even the training, the professional development, those things are important too.
Finally, through the City Accelerator, how have Living Cities and City Foundation helped in all of this?
Oh, it's given us increased bandwidth to go out into communities and connect with folks. We have now a contract person that is able to facilitate some of these conversations. I think the power of a cohort model where you're learning from other cities is really powerful as well. And so it's been a real pleasure to work with Living Cities, with the City Foundation, and we'll continue on.
Very good. Yourself, your name and your affiliation.
Hi, my name is Terica Black. I work in the mayor's office with the City of Atlanta.
Okay, and ignore it. Okay. Let's do this. So if you can introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Terica Black. I work in the mayor's office in the City of Atlanta.
So we're coming up on the holidays. Thanksgiving's coming. You end up at a Thanksgiving meal with a relative who kind of knows that you're with the city and kind of knows what a city does. Tell me about your involvement in the City Accelerator and the project in ways that, crazy old Uncle Harold would understand.
Okay. So Living Cities is, they have a City Accelerator project, and we in the city, the project is focused on civic engagement amongst 5 different cities, and we in the City of Atlanta are focusing on the engagement processes within 5 neighborhoods on the west side of Atlanta. These neighborhoods have historically been somewhat over-engaged but haven't really seen a lot of progress from those engagements. And so we'd like to come in and develop new ways of thinking about partnerships and collaborating, developing more cohesion amongst all stakeholders. Those would be, I said, the City of Atlanta, some of our academic partners, some private and public partners, as well as the residents, of course, to create a better model for engagement that is indicative of all residents within those 5 neighborhoods.
You said over-engaged in the past. I'm curious what that means, particularly if it didn't work so well.
Well, to put it in context, there's probably over 20 different plans that have been introduced by various either developers or cities or the city, either working in silos independently or together, focusing on these particular neighborhoods. And it might be one of them, it might be 2 of the 5, or it might be all 5. And 2 of the biggest are the domes that are being built pretty much in these residents' backyards. So there was a dome that was built in the 1990s, our Georgia Dome, that was attached to large community benefits that they didn't really see. And so now it's kind of reawakening some feelings of distrust and fatigue among those same residents that a new stadium is actually being built now. And so trying to get ahead of things and listen to what the community says didn't work or did work, and help really revitalize that area based on what the residents want to see.
Has there been a resident story that has proved to be, one of those really intrinsically human moments that where a light bulb has gone off, where you said, geez, that's why we're doing this, and that's what we need to be doing, as the team has been talking to area residents that maybe were a little cynical coming in the door?
I'm sure there will be, but we've actually been doing a lot of meta engagement and doing a lot of research and data collection and analysis. So we haven't actually started collecting any narratives just yet. But
in that meta analysis, were there counterintuitive findings and all of that? Were there aha moments in that meta analysis?
I don't necessarily think aha, but definitely some confirming moments. When we started, we knew that there were a lot of different organizations and people either within the community trying to help the community or outside, but once we really started reading archival materials and reports, we, in just the last 4 months or so, have collected over 350 organizations that are working. And so that kind of fragmented process of, people want to see change and people want to do something, but not necessarily collaborating or collaborating and working together even across neighborhoods that have very similar desires and needs. So that's part of the reason why we're like, yes, we need to do this, because I think part of seeing change is being able to decide and work together on what it is that you want to see and how you want to see it.
What does success look like?
Success for us would be that the model or the tools that residents would like to see in terms of how they would like to be engaged or what they would like to be engaged upon lives well beyond our project. And 5 years down the road, that the residents, the stakeholders, that we're all working together, like there's no need to even do this study or research what's been done. Like we already know to collaborate and work together, and that it's that going to residents and knowing what their views and desires and needs are is at the forefront.
Okay. So let's return to the holiday metaphor, or anticipate the holidays. You run into another city worker that maybe you haven't seen in a long time.
Okay.
A person that's a little maybe cynical because they've seen the inside and they've seen past failures, and they they probe you a little bit over eggnog, and how is this one different?
I understand where you're coming from. It on the face, it seems okay. We're just again engaging, but the way that we're going about is quite different. We, in and of ourselves, are coming together first before we even go to the residents, which is one thing that's different. Like we on the back end are collaborating, and then going to the residents. We're not going to the residents concerning a particular issue or development project, but sincerely wanting to know how the residents feel and what their desires are. And we're being completely transparent. We're trying to limit closed-door meetings and let everyone know who's involved, what we're doing, setting clear expectations, and really involving the residents in the process and not coming in afterwards and kind of making them feel like we're doing something to them, but working with them.
What have you learned that wasn't clear when you began?
I think maybe one thing we've learned that wasn't quite as clear is just how, even though the neighborhoods are very geographically close, that they may or may not feel like what they are wanting or needing is similar. And so to do some of the work to really build bridges across the neighborhoods and kind of serving as mediators to help everyone work together. Like it's not necessarily just the part about us coming in as external people that don't necessarily live in the neighborhood, but also working across some of the dividing lines of the geographical neighborhoods.
So through the City Accelerator, tell me a bit about how Living Cities and City Foundation have helped.
A lot of their online resources have been helpful in terms of how we kind of designed our, what we're calling our meta engagement in our first planning phase, and going with their methods of keeping everything transparent and shareable. So I don't think initially we would have thought to put everything online and make everything accessible, but we're in that sharing vein, and so we're creating our website as we speak to be able to share all of our findings and research thus far, and they've really helped with that.
At a global level, give me a sense of the major milestones in the 6-12 months ahead.
6 months, we have collected hundreds of narratives. We've seen clear, defined themes across those that we're able to pull and really gain a great sense of who the residents are and what they want. And then we've had lots of events where we've had great turnouts, and the residents are excited and happy to engage in our collaborative design process and coming up with how this tool and model will look.
For the video record, would you care to introduce yourself, name and affiliation?
Yes, my name is Ariel White, and I work for 504 HealthNet, and I am a member of the New Orleans City Accelerator team.
Okay, you can ignore that.
Okay.
So just to give us lots of flexibility, let's do that one more
Okay. My name is Ariel White. I work for the New Orleans City Accelerator team. I actually work for 504 HealthNet, which is a nonprofit that is partnered with the city.
Very good. So the holidays are coming up.
Yes.
Thanksgiving dinner.
Heard of it.
Good. Crazy old Uncle Harold will be there. He asks, what are you doing? How do you explain this project to him?
I am engaging with community members to help my city get healthier. That's really the crux of it. It's about moving New Orleans to a healthier state of being as a city and as individuals, because we do have a lot of people who haven't seen the doctor in the last 2 years. And it's hard to say like, oh no, you need to do this, go to the doctor. but it's something that is really important. So City Accelerator, in their infinite wisdom, gave us the opportunity to engage with people and say, hey, why don't you go to the doctor? What is it about it that is a barrier for you? Is it internal? Is it external? Is it just that it's too far away? So we really get an opportunity to find out why people don't take care of their health in the way that a lot of people think they should.
Why don't people take care of their health?
I don't know. No, we have some ideas. The first is that it's hard to get there, and it's hard to make an appointment, and it's hard to do this and that. There's an internal barrier of like, I don't necessarily want to go and hear what I'm doing wrong with my life or doing wrong with my health, or I work all the time and the clinics aren't open at 8 o'clock at night when I get off, or a myriad of other reasons. So we're finding all of these different reasons, and we're excited to figure out how we can implement actual interventions that will help people not only go to the doctor, but be healthier overall.
When you think about the state of health of city residents, for people who haven't been paying attention, what would surprise them about what's still out there?
Oh, in terms of just in general.
Illness and, you know.
What would be surprising to people is that there are 60 locations in the greater New Orleans area where you can go and get care for sliding fee scale if you're uninsured. There are insurance programs that are affordable no matter what your income is. So really, in New Orleans, we have a bucket for everybody. We have a program for every person. You don't have to be afraid of the cost barrier because these clinics will help you get rid of that. So that's really important. People don't necessarily know that, like, yeah, I have this Noki thing, whatever that is, but it means I can get free visits to my therapist, or I can get free visits to my primary care doctor. That's exciting and powerful, and it's not something that's really known and talked about as much as I would like it to be.
So what is this Noki thing?
Oh, this Noki thing. It is not pasta. It is a Medicaid waiver program that was established by the state of Louisiana after the Affordable Care Act and before the Supreme Court decision, where we thought we were getting Medicaid expansion, and it was built as a bridge to Medicaid expansion. So it is free primary care and behavioral health visits to individuals who are under 100% of the federal poverty level. So it's an amazing program helping people who wouldn't be able to pay for the doctor otherwise. So it's great. I'm a big fan.
The Noki participants.
Yes.
What are the health challenges that they have that folks living in the suburbs might not be thinking are still a thing?
Oh, well, in New Orleans, we have health problems that a lot of people don't really think about. They think about us always having fun and hanging out, but we have a really high incidence of HIV and AIDS. We have a really high syphilis rate. We have a really high low birth weight issue. So these are all things that I don't know if it's specific to the Noki population, but it's specific to our town, our city. And it's important that we address them because they're things that people don't necessarily think about every day. So that would be why I would say, these are health challenges for our entire community, and we need to address them.
You bring a great deal of enthusiasm and passion to all of this. Let's go back to the holiday metaphor, and you run into a veteran city worker who may be a little more cynical than you are. Been there, done that, we tried that. It didn't work the last time. What makes this different?
Because we're approaching it differently. We're doing this revolutionary thing of meeting people where they are and talking to them about what they need us to do. It's not one-way communication anymore. This is not just two-way communication, it's always communication. It's how do I talk to a resident, a city official, a clinic manager, and get them all on the same page. So it's not just me telling you to go to the doctor, it's encompassing, it's all encompassing. So, gosh, I guess I'm not quite jaded enough yet. I feel like I'm pretty jaded, but it's new and it's different, and it's hopefully sustainable.
What have you learned that wasn't clear when you began?
Oh gosh, it is hard. It is hard to engage people about their health. It's a very personal and very private issue for a lot of people, and engaging people on it is really difficult. It's difficult to convince somebody that they need to talk to me about their diabetes, because it does feel a little intrusive. So I think the more we talk about health, the more we normalize that, and the more it's an acceptable topic of conversation when you're waiting for the bus, when you're in line at the grocery store. The more we talk about it, the better our outcomes will be.
And in those conversations, have there been one or two particularly human moments that said, that's why we're doing this? Either affirmed, either we need to go do that, or that's an affirmation and confirmation of why we're doing this?
Yeah, because we just finished with our focus group work. I had a father of two who recently got custody of his kids, and he was he wasn't ready for them. So he got custody of his kids and was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? His daughter is pre-diabetic and his son was diagnosed with ADHD. And he said, I don't know what to do, and I'm scared. I am scared of what might happen to my kids, and I'm scared that I might not be around because I'm not taking care of my health the way I should. So, and he said, because we're talking about this, because you called me on the phone and said, hey, do you want to talk about this? I have taken a more active role in learning about prediabetes in 15-year-olds, about ADHD diagnosis, about my own pre-diabetic diagnosis. So it was a moment where just having someone say, like, this is important and I care about you, that flipped the way that he was working on his life. So I was really lucky to be able to talk with him about it. And yeah, I think that he took there was a moment and he took control of his health and his kids' health, which is so important. It's huge.
What does success look like?
A beach in Barbados. No. Success looks like reduced HIV rates. It looks like reduced syphilis rates. It looks like reduced low birth weight rates. It also looks like more people going to these safety net clinics so that we have the opportunity to keep it. These clinics are treating people regardless of their ability to pay. So these are such important pillars of our community, and keeping them around is important not only for us now, but for the next generation. So, I mean, success looks like federally qualified health centers forever.
On that point of forever, there's a project, and a project has its own dynamic. It's got a start date and an end date. Forever is a long time, and it goes beyond the project.
It is, yeah.
How is this made permanent?
It's made permanent because this isn't just a project. This is something the clinics do every day. We reach out to people. Every clinic has an outreach team. I do outreach all day, every day. So this isn't something that will stop with City Accelerator. City Accelerator knew that this was happening, and they're like, yeah, this is great. Let's do more of this. So this is forever because it's part of the mission of the people that I work with. And I mean, it's part of our mission too.
How is all of this better for the City Accelerator, for having been part of the City Accelerator?
Well, you got to come to New Orleans, so there's one. Because we're not talking about health. No one else in the room is talking about health. And it is something that is so fundamentally important. And it's hard, and it's not very sexy. So they got an opportunity to, City Accelerator got an opportunity to talk about this incredible issue and really see how it's impacting people every single day.
And how is through the City Accelerator, how is Living Cities and City Foundation helping out?
Oh gosh, the actual TA that we're getting from the Engagement Lab and from City Foundation is incredible. The way that the thinking that is brought to the table, which is different from the way that, I'm a social worker, I think like a social worker. My boss has a degree in public policy, she thinks like a public policy person. And to have another type of thinking come in and say like, maybe we make it a game, maybe we do this other thing to engage people, maybe everyone's a co-designer, is so invaluable because it takes us out of, we can do this forever, but it would be the same thing forever unless somebody came in and said like, hey, maybe let's try something totally different. And that is so important.
For the video record, please introduce yourself, name, and affiliation.
My name is Kathy Nyland. I'm the director of the Department of Neighborhoods with Seattle.
Very good. So the holidays are coming up. Thanksgiving dinner.
My birthday.
Your birthday. Whether it's your birthday party or whether it's Thanksgiving, maybe crazy old Uncle Harold or some other relative you haven't seen in a while shows up. Explain to him what this project is about.
What this project is about is simply continuing conversations, continuing community conversations. The city goes out to communities all of the time to get feedback, solicit, provide information, solicit feedback. It's just continuing that conversation instead of hitting the reset button every single time with every single issue.
Continuing the conversation to what ends?
I think we often say like re-engaging community. We want to build a sustainable, lasting relationship, so we're not coming in and out and re-engaging. It's just more consistent. And again, just continuing that conversation and letting people know what's going on, what the city's doing, what people want and need, and closing loops.
Okay. The genesis of this was around a 20-year plan that was getting long in the tooth, and so put it, if you could just put it in that context, the continuing conversation, and how it relates to the planning process.
Yeah, one of the big initiatives the city is undertaking is updating our comprehensive plan, which is just the 20-year roadmap to how the city will grow. It's complicated, it's wonky, it's boiling it down so people see themselves in that plan and understand and see how they could be impacted.
Okay. So, holidays again, you run into a former colleague, maybe of the curmudgeonly sort, a little cynical, has worked in government a long time.
Yes.
Thinks, been there, done that. How is this different?
This is different because, again, it's coming at it not from a city perspective, from a community perspective. As someone who started off in my neighborhood working on issues, I know the fatigue that we create. So it's understanding that and recognizing that and wanting to do something differently.
What have you learned that wasn't clear when this began?
It's a huge undertaking capacity. It's for such a simple concept, people view it as radical, but changing the way we think, we as a city, we as government think, it's a big lift, but it's a needed lift.
Is there, in all these conversations, are there one or two particularly human moments where it either confirmed a hunch or just damn it, that's why we're doing it?
Actually, yes, a community meeting happened about 3 weeks ago, and often people yell, they get a little frustrated, understandably so. At the end of the meeting, someone came up to me and hugged me and said, "You're hearing us." So that in itself validated and is worth all of the effort and the frustration. We're onto something.
Beyond those kinds of moments, and that's a good moment.
It is a good moment.
What does success look like?
Success looks like when people, especially our internal partners within the city, understand what we're trying to do. It's new, it's different, but it will actually make everyone's lives a little easier and we'll be able to do our jobs even better. So just having people buy into what we're doing and changing the way they think and how they approach community meetings.
Very good. Thinking about the City Accelerator, what it brings to the table, how have Living Cities and City Foundation helped in getting this conversation going?
Just being part of the conversation, having resources where we can ask questions or validating, and just the soundboards that we have and the resources among other cities, it just validates everything that we're thinking, and just sharing those frustrations and learning from one another has been fabulous. I have to say, in my new role, this was a project I wanted to stay involved in, even though I have so many, this is the one I need my fingerprints on because it's fun.
Introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Patrice Carroll from the Department of Planning and Development at the City of Seattle.
You and me.
Okay.
Let's do that one more time.
Patrice Carroll from the Department of Planning and Development in the City of Seattle.
In that role, right at the nexus of it's perhaps not unique to Seattle, but it's certainly happening in Seattle. And that's a lot of technology money moving in. And the old complaints about gentrification and new complaints about traffic. And I suppose it's a great problem to have. But how does this engagement effort crosswalk with that dynamic that's going on in Seattle right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting time because, again, we're engaged in an update of the 20-year plan. And to do that in what quite possibly might be the peak real estate cycle that we've ever seen before, it really changes the conversation. New people are coming to the city and they want to be part of the conversation. But we also have people who've lived there a long time, or maybe people who have lived there for like a decade, and they feel somehow that they're not being heard and that their needs aren't being met. So how do we really be that city that welcomes all perspectives in thinking about what kind of city we're going to be for the next 20 years?
And is the Lesser Seattle movement still extant in the city? The people who liked Lesser Seattle?
I think there's some of that in every city, because we as people, we get anxious about change. We get not so much about change, let me say we're anxious about uncertainty. And the future is about trying to reconcile that uncertainty with how our cities change and grow, because there is no static city. Cities are declining or cities are growing. And so I think that creates a certain level of anxiety in every city.
But this crosswalk between, let's call them the Lesser Seattle folks, and the new arrivals, whether they came in for the technology industry or some other reason, that a little bit ratchets up the pressure on this project, or it's certainly. How do you reconcile those two groups through this engagement process?
Again, I think it's just really understanding what change is coming to the city and bringing people to the table to talk about what kind of changes will benefit the most people in the city. I think that it's particularly in this time of national concern about income inequality, the sort of tech boom that cities like Seattle are experiencing has really heightened people's concerns about that, and how we plan for the future to actually reduce those inequities so that everyone in the city can benefit from the kind of change that's coming.
So far in this process, and I appreciate you're only 6 months in, have there been these moments, like these intrinsically human moments, where old and new have light bulbs have gone off, and there has been at least the hint of potential reconciliation?
Well, I think there have been, and there have been perhaps a little less of the can we stop growing, and more people acknowledging that growth is going to happen, and so now is the time to plan for it, and now is our opportunity to really make sure that we have the kind of city that we want in the future.
What have you learned from this particular process that wasn't obvious before when it started?
I think we really need to broaden our toolbox. It's been interesting that, again, Seattle being such a tech center, being the home of Amazon, people actually say at meetings, like, why can't the city be more like Amazon? Amazon has amazing customer service. And so it's raised the bar everywhere, I think, where people see that business can respond to people's needs very quickly and in a lot of different ways. So I think cities expanding our toolbox of how we can get feedback from people, improve our programs, improve our services, improve our plans, to reflect that we've heard people and we understand their concerns, has really put a lot of pressure on cities across the country.
Very good. Tell me about how Living Cities and City Foundation have helped in all getting this conversation started and going.
I think it's helped in us, in our interdepartmental city team, and having kind of focused time just to reflect and think about this, and then also broadening that out and hearing about and kind of confirming that we're not alone in this, that other cities are experiencing the same kinds of challenges, has been really helpful in thinking about how we could go forward. Are there ideas that we can pick up from New Orleans or Baltimore that, again, we might be able to deploy in Seattle? So that kind of information sharing, it wouldn't happen as a normal part of our work. So really value programs like City Accelerator, where we can have that time to talk to and learn from our peers across the nation.
Very good. I stole this question from NPR, but I like it. What haven't we talked about but should have?
Wow. The World Series? I don't know.
We might want to contain the conversation a little bit.
Well, I think one of the things is that I think about, which we haven't gotten to in our process yet, is what if we do get better at collecting all of this feedback? We also have to develop more tools on the back end. Is how do we like synthesize all that feedback? Haven't found a tech company that can do that for us automatically yet. So that's still a very labor-intensive process. Technology has made it really, really easy for us to collect feedback from more and more people, the people who don't come to public meetings. But I think us, in terms of processing, sharing, and synthesizing that feedback is still going to be a big challenge that we have to work on.
Excellent. Introduce yourself, your name and affiliation.
Sure. I'm Daniel Atzman. I work in the Mayor's Office on Criminal Justice in Baltimore City.
Very good. I know that you had a chance in there to talk about the project, but imagine, if you will, a Thanksgiving dinner. Some relative you haven't seen for a long time knows very little about your work. In that context, tell me about the project. What is the answer to crazy old Uncle Harold's question about what are you doing?
Yeah, after I asked him to pass the cranberry sauce, so I'll give him the nutshell version. We're essentially looking to identify and address communication and connectivity gaps with the services available to returning citizens. Those are the people returning home to their communities after being incarcerated. And we're doing that by first starting with a series of focus groups that'll be designed and led by returning citizens themselves. We're going to have 5 focus groups, one all-female group to address those specific needs. Then after the focus group, we're going to work with that same cohort of returning citizens to form working groups and co-design solutions to some of the key issues we identify in the focus groups. And then phase 2 of the project will be implementing those solutions.
Designed and led by returning citizens. That's interesting. What are the mechanics of that? It seems it's an interesting idea, but how do you make that part of it work?
Sure. Well, we have a lot of great partners that are helping us identify and recruit willing individuals, and recognizing that this community and population is one that's generally in a lot of need. We're providing incentives to incentivize participation as well. So I know time is valuable for all of us, but especially for this population that are often struggling with a number of issues, from childcare to transportation to looking for work and unemployment. We thought it was really important to compensate people for their time, and we hope that by having returning citizens lead the discussion, that peer exchange will really produce the kind of honest and frank discussion that we need to have about the services, where we're falling short, and how we can improve them.
And those discussions, have they begun already?
We're just about to get started.
So, without presuming on the outcome of those discussions, what gaps has the city already identified being in the way of returning citizens?
Sure. Well, we know we need to do a better job just communicating what's out there to people. And how that works, what that looks like, is what we're hoping to find out. We want to hear from them the easiest way to reach, the most effective way to communicate, whether it's via social media, SMS, flyers, and the packets of information people are given when they're leaving the facility, the kind of follow-up that would help them not only be aware but also access the services. So we want to make sure those resources are being utilized effectively. And another gap, which I think we're going to hear about, is the services amongst service providers, especially the private providers, aren't always as well coordinated as they could or should be.
Maybe in conversations with partners, in advance of these focus groups, I'm wondering whether you've heard a particular story or had a particular conversation that goes to the human moments in behind these initiatives that's either confirm, yeah, we're on the right track, or you get this feeling in your gut, yes, that's why we're doing this.
How are we doing, Zachy?
Can you recall one of those stories?
Yes, I can. really in Baltimore, we've had such a large population of people that have been incarcerated and have the experience of returning back from their community. And in my regular work of engaging neighborhoods, you often hear a lot about from older people that have gone through the reentry process about the stumbling blocks they faced and the need to ease that transition for younger people, especially considering the changed environment that younger people are returning to as opposed to what people encountered decades ago when they were returning back, and also the much larger number of returning citizens that we have nowadays.
I know that this would never be true of Baltimore, but imagine, if you will, over the holidays, you run into a former or maybe just a fellow city employee that you haven't seen for a long time, and perhaps he or she's a little more curmudgeonly than you are and a little more cynical, and it gives you the eye roll about, we've tried something like this before and it didn't work out so well. Convince that person that this one's different and how it is different.
Well, in a sentence, I'd say we've never systematically sought the input of the population involved. And that's key. I mean, that's where the real intelligence and the experience lies. And building upon that, I think we can devise sustainable solutions that would be more effective than what we've tried in the past. Not that previous efforts haven't been worthwhile, but we can build upon previous success.
And I know that we're still in advance of the focus groups as we talk here today, but what are some things that you've learned that weren't clear when you began?
Things that we've learned that weren't clear when we began. Well, the process of engaging, how thoughtful we need to be, the importance of having peers lead the discussion, providing incentives, and making the barriers to participation in the focus groups and the work groups as low as possible. That people have difficult, busy lives, and if we're going to impose upon them to help us improve this system, we need to make sure we're doing our best to make it as easy for folks to participate as possible, which really gets to the heart of good citizen engagement practices generally, regardless of the population you're dealing with.
That decision that it be peer-led, how did you get to that decision?
Well, I think it's evolved a little bit over time, and with our team discussing it. In the experience of working in Baltimore City, we have some very diverse communities, and engaging them on a variety of issues, we've really seen through experience how important it is to have people that they can relate to having these discussions. Being the guy in the suit coming down from City Hall and talking to someone doesn't always elicit the same frank, honest response that we need for a good conversation as in having a community charrette where it's really led and organized by the community itself.
And just for the purposes of the video, define the community charrette just a little bit. Give me 30 seconds on that.
Any collaborative design process around any issue, being it a new plan for parks or streets or a new social service system, that would be, charrette is that process of co-designing and engaging residents and soliciting their input for that project.
What does, and I suppose there's a project answer to this, and there's a wider community-wide answer to this over time, but what does success look like?
What does success look like? So for this project, I'd say it's getting to actionable goals, and really developing the intelligence we need to formulate those goals. Hearing from the citizens themselves what the gaps are and having them design solutions, and then from there, obviously, implementing them. I think the most important hurdle, though, is engaging them in that process, the design process, and furthermore, creating that feedback loop, too, which would be the wider community goal. Is if we're going to make this sustainable and hold ourselves accountable to the goals we've set, we need to make sure that feedback is being consistently solicited and incorporated into everything we're doing to ensure continuous process improvement.
Very good. In the context of the City Accelerator, tell me a bit about how Living Cities and the City Foundation have been able to help.
Well, you know, they have a great expertise in citizen engagement, so they've really helped us refine our project, suggest some methods to engage the population we're working with. And, you know, like we said, we're kind of just getting started now, but I really anticipate them having some great input throughout the focus group phase. And once we develop those phases, how to really have a successful co-design of solutions. This is something relatively new, so using their expertise and having that technical assistance available is going to be very important to us.
Very good. As I've told the other people I've been talking to this morning, I've stolen this idea from NPR, but I really like it. This question from NPR, but I really like it. What haven't we talked about but should have?
Let's see. Well, maybe the context.
Yes.
Sure. You know, generally speaking, Baltimore is a post-industrial city similar to Cleveland and Detroit, where we've had a lot of manufacturing jobs. The former economic base of our city move away over the previous few decades, and now we're living in a new economy with new institutions, new major employers, and every part of the city and every segment of our society, including returning citizens who are generally concentrated in some of our most challenged neighborhoods, need to be empowered in order to participate in this new economy. That's why it's so important to make sure we're providing them quality and consistent services and support.
In terms of context, Baltimore made news this last year in a post-Ferguson sort of way. And to what degree did that inform this work?
Sure. If anything, it only underscored the importance and the urgency of this work. I think we all saw a population that's been disinvested in for a very long time for a lot of historical reasons. But it's on us now to correct that and to make sure people are engaged and empowered in every sense of the word, politically, economically, so that we have the pipelines to jobs, we have the upward mobility. People have the wherewithal and the hope that they can secure a better life for themselves.
Very good. Excellent. We'll leave it there. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.